The most useful skill to improve is the ability to recognize and make your strongest board every round. This is easily the most beneficial skill to invest in, as it's the skill you'll often be utilizing the most in-game. It's almost second nature to high elo players who are constantly analyzing how to optimize and make the most out of the resources they are given every turn. Better players will naturally build stronger boards while given the same resources as the rest of the lobby. This allows them to pull off long win streaks and save more HP even without high rolling. This skill is simple to learn but difficult to master, so let's make sure we start with the basics. No matter what comp, carry, or even level you're at, your strongest board is always the same concept at its core: a good front line and a good back line. You want to maximize your damage as well as your ability to stall. When you ask yourself, what is my strongest board here? What you're asking yourself is, which combination of units buys me the most time and maximizes my damage? Let's start by understanding the three main factors: traits, upgrades, and items. Starting with traits. Traits may seem simple on the surface, but can be misleading if you're not thinking critically. One easy way to evaluate a trait's power is to look at what traits are on your carry. In this case, because Kog'Maw is a rapid fire, getting Kindred in to activate 2 rapid fire does a lot for our board. It enables our main carry. Adding someone like Jhin to our board does activate a trait, 2 marksman, but doesn't make nearly as much impact as having 2 rapid fire. It's much more efficient to funnel all your resources into 1 carry and 1 tank. So in this example, you would much rather have Boombot activated because it activates our Kog'Maw and provides more damage. On the flip side, we want to be conscious about which traits actually enable our carry. So Kog'Maw is an offensive carry, and both of his traits help him with that role. On the flip side, we have Alistar. His 2 traits are Bruiser and Golden Ox. Because his role is a tank, we only care about Bruiser, as even if we have our main items on Alistar and he's our main tank, we don't care about activating both his traits. Bruiser makes him tankier and helps him with his role, while Golden Ox only provides damage amp, which doesn't do anything to help this particular setup. And finally, we have to consider optimization. So Mundo has 3 Street Demon, and that's a trait that requires 2 other units to play, something like Zyra or Echo. Now this trait does help enable Mundo as a tank by making him tankier, and actually helps Kog'Maw do more damage, as Street Demon is considered a team-wide trait that does benefit units who are on the hexes. So it follows the first 2 rules, but unfortunately, if we're trying to play a level 5 board, we have to choose between either playing 3 Street Demon or 2 Bruiser and 2 Rapid Fire. In this case, while Street Demon does provide frontline and backline, these 5 units do the same job, but better. There's a whole lot more we can cover about traits, so we'll cover them with examples later in the video. For now, let's move on to the next part: upgrades. When you upgrade a unit, it becomes 50% stronger. To clarify, an upgraded unit gains 50% more HP, AD, and a 50% stronger spell. You want to think about upgrades like any other trait that empowers your board. Often, especially in the early game, an upgraded unit is more valuable than activating a trait. For example, on the left I have 1-star bastions, and on the right I have an upgraded unit with 1 bastion, and no traits. What makes for a stronger board here, left or right? See, the goal of bastions is to provide a front line. But if the right side can provide a better front line, then it makes for a stronger board. And in this case, an upgraded Vi 2 does a better job than the bastions. This might be easier to visualize if we use 2 Bruisers instead as an example. Now it's really just a question of who has more HP. And simply, it's the right side again. 2 Bruiser may grant bonus HP, but an upgraded Vi simply has more effective HP by being an upgrade and having a 50% stronger spell. Finally, let's talk about items. So itemization is a huge topic by itself, so in this video we'll stick to talking about how to allocate items that you already made. Items will scale off each other, so it's vital to put all your items on the same unit. This is pretty obvious, but if you have an item like Adaptive and an item like Vow on Shyvana, it's much better to put the items all in one unit rather than splitting them apart. But this also extends to units that don't really hold certain items. For instance, in this scenario, let's say we want to play towards Anima Squad, and we can make an IE for Azaya down the road. In this case, even though Vayne is the AD carry and Seraphine is AP, we want to put the IE with Seraphine, as she's already holding all 3 of her items, and this will make for a higher damage output than splitting her items. Later on, you can just move the items off or sell the Seraphine to put the IE on Xayah and move the items to someone like Aura. Now obviously, this isn't the same case for every item. For instance, even if Senna has 2 items, I'm never going to slam a Bramble to complete her 3rd item because it does nothing to scale her actual damage. Whereas a Infinity Edge on Seraphine is fine because it at least lets her ability crit. Even a Deathblade on Seraphine would do something because, well, it does 10% more damage and you can put it on Xayah later. What would make more sense for Senna is to build a blue buff if you wanted to play towards Zed or Vex later on. Blue buff is by no means optimal in Senna, but it gives her 10% more damage and decreases her cast time. Later on, if you find a better item for Senna before you find your Vex, you can simply use your remover to take the blue buff off and put the Deathblade back on. The whole idea is to always be playing your strongest board possible at any moment. Now, once you find your actual late game carries, this becomes a lot less relevant. For instance, if I'm playing a MF and a Elise duo, I'm probably going to be splitting my IE and Deathblade onto MF and moving an Archangels onto Elise, rather than having all 3 items on MF. This optimization is mostly for item carries in the early and mid game. Even then, there are a lot of moments where you do apply this rule. For instance, if you're playing Marksman Vanguards and you're playing Aphelios and Xayah, most times you're not going to be able to 2-star both units on your 4-2 rolldown. At best, you're only going to have 1 unit fully upgraded. This means if your 3 items are really good for Aphelios, with like a Rageblade, Giant Slayer, and a Kraken's, it's always going to be better to put your items on a Xayah 2 than the Aphelios. Again, this is all about funneling all your resources onto one carry, and even though 2 of these items are suboptimal on Xayah, it still makes for the overall stronger board. Later, when Aphelios is 2-starred, you can move the items right back and find better items for Xayah. Let's use a real in-game clip as an example. After finishing his level 9 rolldown, he makes his items, and he reallocates them to the strongest units. Notice how even though Aura isn't a great user of blue buff, he doesn't split the blue buff onto Elise and the rest of the items on Aura. Instead, he groups all 3 items together, because a 3-item carry still leads to the overall stronger board. So the first 3 factors are a great start, and you really should master them. But beyond that, there are obviously other conditions in a game of TFT. Things like augments, your position in a game, your HP, even money will factor into what your strongest board should be. And the best way to learn them will be by looking at VODs or playing games. I personally think VODs are a lot better because you have the time to sit back and analyze the board. So augments, I think build a board is pretty simple here. Build a bud, sorry. Again, we want to combine the 2 strongest factors. So with a 3-star unit, a 3-star unit makes having an artifact even stronger. An artifact is just a stronger item. I'd say it's like a 1.5 or 1.8 times stronger. I moved a bit quick here, but if I were going to ask you what my strongest board here is, it's obviously play 2 bruisers, that's a given, and we have a +1 unit. I wouldn't have to level here because I think most people don't have a 3-star on 2-1, so we can make 10 here. And the reason we don't play a Jhin, which, well, the question here is like we have the 2 bruisers and we play 1+1 unit here, any backliner, right? Jhin is a 2-cost unit, and we're not activating any traits, so he would be the actual strongest board. But because we have an opportunity to make 10 here, we actually just play Zyra. The benefit of playing Zyra over Kindred is that obviously she's 2 out of 3 Street Demon, so if you find like a Echo or any other Street Demon, we can just play 3. And it buffs her actual main damage and main tank, which in this case, our main carry and our main tank are both Mundo. This is a good example of when your strongest board is affected by other conditions. In this case, it would be money. In general, we're trying to build this Mundo up. Because he's our strongest unit, by far, we want to enable his traits, so we're looking for Slayers, Bruisers, and Street Demons. The obvious thing to do here is to level, but what would you play as your strongest board? In this spot, I think activating Slayers is pretty important, so I get to play Shaco and TF. So keep in mind that the Syndicate trait doesn't actually matter, it's more about getting Shaco in. And if we're going to play Darius either way, might as well play the TF. Here, we're even fortunate enough to get 1 gold. Now, in the next round, what is your strongest board? Is it still TF or something else? You could play Jhin and Morgana here for Dynamo, but I do believe getting Slayer in is a bit more important. I can see the argument that Jhin and Morgana are quite similar in strength, and they also lead to easier boards on Stage 3. For example, this 3 Syndicate doesn't really go into anything that I can play, so getting a 2 Dynamo in can lead my game easily into 4 Dynamos or even into Fast 9 Urgot. And that's something also worth mentioning is what comp you're playing towards can affect what your strongest board is. If you're in a spot where you kind of have to roll on level 8 for your level 8 comp, then sometimes you do have to play a slightly weaker board just so you're playing the right units and saving money. In this case though, I believe the Build a Bud augment gives me enough momentum to make it to level 9, so we aren't worried too much about what we play on level 8. As we level to 5, what is your strongest board here? I think it's pretty simple. I would just play the rapid fire. Our TF isn't really doing much, but because we are giving him a void staff and he has a syndicate hat, it doesn't hurt to give him rapid fire. Again, not a huge deal, but it's more so we have nothing better to play. As the game progresses, you may notice the amount of units I'm holding on my bench. These are all units that have potential to be on your board as long as you fulfill the right requirements. For instance, if I find another bruiser, I can play 4 bruiser, or if I find 4 slayers, I can play 4 slayers. Whatever has the potential to be a stronger board than the current one we're using. In this case, what do you think the strongest board here is? Because Mundo scales so heavily off HP, the strongest board here would be just to play 4 bruiser and any backliner. In this case, Seraphine. I also do hold the 4 Slayer just in case I get a stronger board, but because I have the Void Staff, it's kind of hard for me to play around AD. Here we push to level 7. What is your strongest board currently? Here we can play a Rengar for 3 Sri Demon as well as Zyra, while still playing the 4 Bruisers and the Slayers. Once we arrive at level 8, we can still continue to play the strongest board, as we're not in a spot where we have to roll on level 8 to play some 4 cost carry. We're in a spot with this much HP and this much gold to easily make it to level 9. We also took Moonlight for that reason, so we can actually push to level 9 and either play around 7 Street Demon board or play towards Urgot. I would have preferred these items on Senna, but I actually don't know whether they're better on a Zyra 2 or a Senna 2 here. I'm pretty sure it's Senna, but obviously with Moonlight, you want it on Zyra. This is also a good example of why holding other units on your bench, even if they might not fit on your board right now, can be really good. So for instance, I played a Jinx over Rengar, but in this spot, with a Vex in my shop, or my bench, I can easily play Vex and Rengar for the Executioner. So those were a couple of examples of a real game where you have to figure out your strongest board. As you play your own games, I'm sure you'll get different and more scenarios and situations you might not be familiar with. For the most part, they should carry over, and you'll be learning a bit from every spot. For the most part, you'll be rolling on level 8 to find your board that you see on guides or other websites, but until then, you should learn how to play around with the resources you're given in shop every round. If you're in a spot to go fast sign, that's going to be more relevant on stage 4, where you don't have to roll at level 8, so you continue to play your strongest board. And even on level 9, you're not guaranteed to hit everything, so you'll still be trying to figure out your strongest board as you roll your gold, building towards your highest cap.